Hello. I got a question from Victoria asking that I clarify what I mean by pinch points. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. If you have any questions about any of my videos or anything about writing, comics, what have you, leave them down below and I will get to them. And also check and make sure that you are subscribed. I know a lot of you comment a lot and are actually not subscribed to the channel, which, you might want to do that. Anyways, let's talk about pinch points. So I often will talk about 7-point structure, and I often talk about the 3-act structure, and I've come to the point where I use them pretty interchangeably. They're very similar. I think they just name things differently. In the 7-point structure, there are things called pinches and there are things called plot turns. And pinches basically are scenes, collections of scenes, just narrative pressure. Pressure within the narrative that leads to a plot turn. In the previous video, I said that a climax could be considered a pinch. And I think that's true, and it's also not true, and I can understand where the confusion would be, because a climax, when you're thinking of it in the 3-act structure, it's more a collection of a plot turn and a pinch together. I would think of a climax. So I've been playing a lot of video games lately. I've been playing specifically JRPGs lately. And when you're in the climactic battle with whatever, there is the beginning of the battle, which I would describe as a pinch. And then there is a turning point in the battle where everything goes towards the hero's favor, and that would be the plot turn. That is where everything you learned as a main character, everything the main character has learned, everything they have overcome, it comes together in this moment and it moves on. I can think of it really easily in Bravely Default because I listened to the song Serpent Devouring the Horizon, and the whole beginning of that song is so villain focused. Like if you listen to it, you can just feel there's like Snake vibes, there's big villain energy, and then there comes a point where hope is almost lost, everything goes down, and then we have our plot turn where the character themes come in. And it's triumphant and we win, Like that is the difference between a plot turn and a pinch. There are so many different types of plot turns, and I think generally the reason that I have become so lax in how I classify things when I'm talking, and I really shouldn't, I should be more specific, is because I don't think about overarching plot as much as I used to, especially as I've moved into trying to do more episodic content and trying to do more long form content with multiple arcs and trying to think of things more as like not TV, but like more in seasons. I've been trying to think about that. Like I'm writing Crow Story, which is one of my comics that isn't out right now. I do have a video where I talk about Crow Story for 7 hours, so if you're interested in Crow Story, there's content for Crow Story that exists. It's just not the actual written content. That said, I'm working on it being a lot more episodic. I don't think as hard about the 3-act structure as I do in like my previous works. Like even thinking about the books of Avo right now, like I'm working on book 2 and 3 simultaneously, and there's like definitely a 3-act structure that happens in each book, but they're connected and there's like an overarching 3-act structure. And I find like the more I get into stories and the longer and more intricate I get into, I don't like to think entirely about the main 3 acts anymore. It just doesn't help me as much. I think it's integral to learn this, and I think it's become very intuitive for me. That said, the concept of pinch and plot turn has really helped me as a writer in general. I don't tend to think about it like where it would occur in the 7-point structure, because when you're dealing with large plots, when you're dealing with multiple plots, where you're dealing with layers upon layers of plots, there's always going to be pinches happening, because like I've discussed multiple times before, I will discuss until the end of time, there are 4 types of plots. There's location plots, answer plots, character plots, and event plots. And they're all very simple, basic plots, and you're always going to have multiple of them layered even in a short story. Because location plots are about starting in one place, ending in another. Answer plots are about a question and then an answer. Character plots is about it's a character arc, and an event plot is status quo is disrupted, and then it is reestablished or made anew. Either way, new status quo. And because I think about all of these different layers of plots, when I'm actually writing, what I tend to think is, I have a plot turn coming up. I have a revelation coming up. I need there to be pressure before this. I tend to think about my stories in terms of like motivation and pressure. And whenever I am reading stories for critique, because I do a critique stream once a month for my patrons, where I have read numerous scripts at this point, one thing that always sticks out to me, regardless of like where in the story I'm reading, whether it's the beginning, the end, the middle, what have you, tracking where pressure is and where it gets released is just very important. Because if you don't apply pressure before you make a major change, it can often feel like it comes out of nowhere. You need to put pressure on the character. Often it needs to be external. There can be internal. Usually like what's happening is boiling under the surface, but something external has to happen. Some sort of like motivating factor. A lot of the times I find that writers will keep these internal things going, and I think there's tons of nuance within a character, but having something external that motivates them is very important. And in order for pinches to really work, they need to be very tangible. You need very tangible pressures on your character, on your story, so that you can have a plot turn. So like the inciting incident is a plot turn, and like the call to action is the pinch, I think. I think that's why climax gets a bit confusing, because I think climax usually refers to like both the plot turn and the pinch, whereas I think you can break inciting incident into call to action and inciting incident, because there's also refusal of the call, which happens, which is just a reiteration. It's a building of the pressure, actually. Your character sees hints at the adventure to come, and that's like the building pressure. Like, okay, let's think about the Books of Avo. So in my comic, the Books of Avo, which is, you know, both in the description, and I'm uploading an audiobook / comic version onto YouTube right now. Shameless plug. But there's a lot of pressure that builds up before the actual inciting incident to the big major story. I would say that there's like a lot of pressure put onto the main character, Juliet. She has her comfortably uncomfortable life, which is usually a good place to start with a main character. And then there is pressure put onto her. Like some of the pinch points are that like she's going to be evicted, like that it puts pressure on her, is not really the inciting incident, but it is like the beginnings of it. It is the bubbling of it. And I think like a call to action that she gets is when a dragon shows up in town. And that's where she has the choice to either go with the dragon, go figure out what's happening with this dragon, or just give up. And of course, she goes to figure out what happens with the dragon. And then more pressure builds up, and she is given like more chance to reconsider. And like when I'm writing it, I find like there's just so much building and layering of pressure and pinch points that like when you sit down and outline it, it ends up being like way more scenes than I would think. Yeah, and generally, I just think that pinches end up being less singular plot points and rather like just the building pressure. It takes as many seeds as it's going to take. I think it is possible to sit down and outline your script and figure out what the major pinches are going to be, but a lot of the times they end up being like broken down further into a whole bunch of scenes, and that's definitely the case in Avo. And I think it's important to pay attention to your pinches and the pressure that you need to build up. Like each scene, especially in like the beginning and like the ending, each scene is building on the next, creating more and more pressure until you hit a plot turn. Your plot turn is like when the balloon explodes. You know, you just got to keep filling the balloon with air until it explodes. The right amount is going to be however much air you need to fill it with in order for it to explode. In the case with Avo, the way that I kind of can conceptualize it a little bit is that there is a lot of pressure that needs to be put onto Juliet before she can reach the actual inciting incident and recognize and get like the very official final call to action to be like, do you want to go save the world and possibly die doing it? You have to take her from being a little landlady who is on a date that she's not enjoying to like, okay, I will save the world with you, dragon woman. And in order to do that, you have to put enough pressure, and that's what all the scenes building up to it are. They are the building pressure, the pinch leading up to the eventual plot turn. That is sort of like what I'm describing in the climax as well, where you're fighting the big final battle. There's what's called the all is lost moment, right? And that's what I was talking about, like the music dipping and going somber, where it's like, I don't think the heroes can win. And through the final amount of darkness, that's where you're able to have your plot turn, because that is like the ultimate pressure that causes the snapping point. And causes everything to shift in the hero's favor. You can find these all over the place. Yeah, so that's all I have to talk about today. I would really like to get more followers on Comic Fury. I know a lot of you aren't on Comic Fury, but if you are, and if you aren't, please join Comic Fury and subscribe to the Scourge of 9 Point, because that's specifically what I want to get lots of follows. Because I'm getting close. I've got like 250 or something on there. I don't know, something very low compared to YouTube. So I would like it to grow. I know there's not tons of following on Comic Fury, but you can find me there and tons of other amazing comics, because we are Comic Fury supporters. So the links are all below. I only link to my Comic Fury sites because I put so much effort into making them pretty. So yeah, check those out and give me a follow. Thank you. That's all.